You ever look back at your old photos and just think to yourself,
I really used to dress like that.
for me, every era in terms of fashion and my tastes, the way it changed over time, was always tied to music. It was always about the music that I was obsessed with at the time. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how my fashion taste has changed over the years and how I eventually ended up, being able to build my own taste and not just copying whatever was out there. Alright, let's go where it all started. Let's go back to the beginning.
In the beginning.
In my pre-teen years, I was deep in the world of pop music and Disney adjacent songs. A lot of that just came from watching TV. Like, I was watching a lot of TV shows at the time as a kid. If you grew up in the late 2000s and early 2010s, you definitely know what I'm talking about. TV was a big part of our lives at that point because our phones weren't quite what they are today. So a lot of the things that inspired us and a lot of the things that influenced us was mainly stuff that we saw on our big screens. And for me at the time, there was a lot of these Disney shows, Disney adjacent characters. Like, I for one grew up watching a lot of Pair of Kings, Zack and Cody, Lab Brats, those type of shows. And that's where I got most of my influence from. At that stage, I did not even understand what fashion was as a concept. Like, clothes were just clothes. Whenever my parents would take me shopping, I would always fringe like the most graphic t-shirts and like the most graphic pair of trousers I could find. And at the time, Batman, Spider-Man were the most popular thing on TV. So anything that had Batman or Superman printed on it, that was most likely what I would run towards. There was no taste yet. It was just pure excitement and attachment to the characters and the songs that I loved. But even then, you can already see the patterns. What I watched and what I listened to was equal to what I wanted to wear. The two were intertwined. Fast forward to my teenage years. Now this is where things really started to take a shift, and this was mainly because of the influence of my older brother. Being around him meant I was getting more exposed to things like hip hop and rap music and R&B. And at this point, like, I hadn't really formed like an opinion to be able to say I listened to a certain type of music. So this was almost like the entry level. At first it was just me hearing it in the background, when we were hanging out. But eventually I started to listen to that music on my own, looking up songs, watching music videos in my free time, watching those videos and seeing how these rappers dressed. It was like a completely different universe. The way they put outfits together was so distinct compared to what I saw day to day or in other parts of entertainment. I was instantly hooked. So come the next time my parents decided to take me shopping for clothes. Naturally, I used to be the type of person who would run and go grab the graphic tees, the superhero themed clothes, right? But then now, there was a bit of a difference. Instead of just grabbing random graphic tees, I suddenly had references. I was asking for pieces I had seen rappers wearing in their videos. Look at me, I'm even calling the clothes pieces. I was trying to copy that look. And at that age, you're very impressionable and you just want to be like the people you look up to. Of course, my parents did what parents will normally do. They filtered it a bit because in the normal world, you can't be going around looking like a rapper. Fair enough. Like, they limited how far I could push it and only allowed me to get like the reasonable pieces of clothes for someone my age at least. But at that point, like, I knew like this was the first time I can pinpoint where the music started to influence my personal styles. And at this point I can really say it influenced it directly because I wanted to wear the exact same things that the rappers were wearing. Now fast forward a bit. Obviously as I got older, now I have more access to the internet, technology has developed a bit. My investment in hip hop only increased. Like, at this point, like, I was heavily intrigued by this genre and like this space and this culture. And I was so much so into it that it even started to influence like the type of friends that I was having. The movement, the lifestyle, not just the song, everything intensified. At some point I finally had my own money, and once that happened, there was no more parental filters on what I could buy, so I went full streetwear. This was a crucial phase in terms of like my journey into fashion and discovery, right? On the surface, I was still trying to dress like the rappers I admired, oversized silhouettes, logos, sneakers, the whole thing. But underneath that, something important was happening. I was realizing I had a genuine interest in how clothes worked. I was no longer just copying, I was paying attention. I started noticing details, shapes, colors, how pieces come together. Music had basically opened that door into fashion, and now I was stepping through it properly. Now this is where things sort of took a big jump. But I look back at 2020, during COVID times, pre-COVID and after COVID, where generational shift happened in almost like the way we do everything in terms of like technology, entertainment, socializing, you know, etc. So many things changed in that brief period of time that the way I looked at fashion before that and after that completely changed. That was when I got introduced to the fashion side of social media. Suddenly my feed wasn't just artists and music videos. It was creators who created their own style, like their life depended on it. These were people breaking down outfits, you know, doing fit checks, you know, people showing lookbooks. This was the first time I even discovered like what a lookbook was. And they talked about like how they chose certain pieces. You know, I even learned like what stylists were. I didn't even know like there was such a thing as a stylist. But at this point, like I'm learning how intentional they are about like the clothes they wear and the clothes that they decide to choose for other people and like these performers and rappers. And at this point, that's when I learned the biggest thing that took me in the direction that I eventually am in today. Stylists were the people behind my favorite rappers, the people I grew up listening to. I naturally always used to think like that was their own style, but learning that they had stylists, people who choose the outfits that they wear in these videos and brands endorsing them, that's when my mind started to open up. That's when I started to realize there was actually layers to this. At this point, I stopped thinking just in terms of good outfits and started thinking in terms of brands. I began to understand which brands are strong at making jackets. I started understanding which brands are good at making jeans. I started to understand which brands are good at making t-shirts and which brands specialize more in formal wear. Before this shift, I would just go to that one outlet and buy everything head to toe from there. After, it became a mix and match process based on what each brand did the best. That mindset came from seeing how seriously these creators took their style. And again, it all started from the kind of music scenes and artists I was following online. Now, fast forward a bit. In my late teen years and going into my early 20s, my music taste started to expand properly. I was no longer just listening to hip hop and rap music. You know, I was starting to get into other genres like house and garage and jazz and even old school hip hop and R&B. Like I used to be just a new gen before this, but now I was actually listening like to the older stuff, like stuff that came out before I was born. I'm talking 90s and 80s hip hop and R&B music. Each of these genres came with their own culture and they had like their own visual language, and naturally that started to like influence how I dressed, and I started to look at everything all over again. So my style shifted once more. But this time there was a key difference. By this point I was older, my brain wasn't just chasing the trends the way it did when I was younger. I was less impressed by whatever the new thing was, and I was more interested in what actually suited me. Around this time, I also started getting into the new underground wave of hip hop. You know, that had been making noise for a while, but then it was only starting to intensify around this point. Within that space, there's a very specific way that the artists like to dress and like approach fashion. It's a bit more experimental, it's a bit more do-it-yourself. It's definitely a bit more, it's more niche. Like that's how I can basically describe it. But if you listen to underground music, you definitely know what I'm talking about. But now instead of just copying everything I saw, I could filter it. I could appreciate the style, take inspiration, and then ask, does this actually fit me? Like, does this actually fit my body, my lifestyle, my tastes? You know, like I was starting to ask those questions. I wasn't just blindly following and like getting whatever from the rack that I saw was trending. And that was the point where I stopped being loosely pulled around by every new trend and started building something that actually felt like my style. So you might wonder, or I might wonder in myself making this video, like where has all of this left me? Like what sort of relevance does this all have to where I am now and like the direction I seem to be going in? Music is still a huge influence on how I dress, and it always will be. But now, instead of letting every new song or every new artist completely dictate my outfit and my wardrobe, I use it more as a lens. I take bits from the genres I love, the looseness of hip hop, polish of R&B, the energy of house and garage, even the nostalgia that I get from the old school tracks, and I mix that with what I know works on me. I'm at that point where I can say, I know what silhouettes suit me. I know which pieces I will actually wear. I know when I'm liking something just because a song or a video is making it look cool versus when it genuinely fits my taste. That is when your style starts to feel unique. In conclusion, I can say my style is still influenced by music, but it's not dictated by it and it's not controlled by the music. It's now its own thing, like it's developed and formed into its own life form, and it's beginning to sprout. Now, if there's one thing I want you to take from all of this, music is very powerful and it can literally shape how you see yourself. for me, it was the initial spark that even got me interested in fashion. Like, it got me into that whole realm of like being curious as to like what fashion really was, and like what was the process beyond just like the making of the clothes, and like what inspired people to even do this. But apart from that, the key is to let it inspire you, but not fully define you. Like, use it as a starting point to explore and gradually pay attention to what actually feels like you. This is my first ever YouTube video, so let me know in the comments what genre or artist had the biggest impact on your style growing up. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of how my taste evolved, I'll be doing more videos from like a brand owner perspective, because I am actively learning and like working on creating my own brand. And always share and like talk about style, culture, and how we can actually build a wardrobe that feels intentional. Otherwise, thank you for tuning in, and peace and love. Cheers, man. No gunshots.